Kia ora, tēnā koutou katoa. So my name is James Nikitine. This is my colleague Peter Wells, who from the Blue Cradle Foundation. So tēnā koutou katoa, ko Mont Blanc te maunga, ko Lake Léman te awa, no French Alps ahau, ko Nikitine tongu, whanau, ko James toku ingoa. Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. Good afternoon. My name is James Nikitine. I'm from the French Alps and Geneva in Switzerland. I moved here 2 years ago with my family as a recipient of the Edmund Hillary Fellowship. I'm an interdisciplinary marine scientist, filmmaker, and consultant with several international multilateral organizations, non-profit foundations, and UN agencies. I am French-British citizen. I'm a Master of Marine Science, and I've worked and consulted globally with the International Union for Conservation of Nature, several UN agencies, including the Oceanographic Commission of UNESCO, the International Seabed Authority, and the United Nations Environment Programme. I'm passionate about the ocean, and I'm most at home when I'm in the ocean, snorkeling, diving, or in a submersible. Last year, during the lockdown, from my observations of the situation here, I decided to start an ocean social enterprise and non-profit. Blue Cradle and the Blue Cradle Foundation aim to make ocean science more accessible and provide a platform for marine science, education, and interdisciplinary marine research in Canterbury and beyond. Based between the Southern Ocean and the South Pacific Islands, Blue Cradle is in an ideal geographical position here in Canterbury to work collaboratively to understand the implications of a warming planet and ocean facing biodiversity collapse and pollution of all sorts. Now, Canterbury is perhaps not most well known for its marine environment, but in fact it has 800 kilometers of rugged coastline stretching north of Kaikoura at Kekerengu Point to the Waitaki River. This represents 11,620 square kilometers of ocean. It includes the ocean space above a large continental shelf, a deep sea canyon, many river mouths, estuaries, and 3 main currents carrying nutrients to support a rich and varied diversity of marine flora and fauna. It is incredibly varied with long sandy beaches, gravel beaches, rocky shores, mudflats, and the rugged coastline of volcanic Banks Peninsula, with caves, small islands, and marine habitats. At Blue Cradle, we applied ourselves and wrote grant applications and filled the space with a collaborative ocean agenda and ocean literacy education on our agenda. Our first project actually came to us, and since August, we've been virtually with no funding working on a white-flippered penguin survey all around Banks Peninsula using GIS technology and led by ecotourism company Pohatu Penguins. Using a citizen science model and working with over 60 volunteers with the support of local hapu and multiple agencies, including ECan and the Rata Foundation, we engage the community through educational events and the production of a documentary, Korora, which is currently in cinemas. In June, our second project will use a research vessel in Auckland and we'll look at microplastics and biosecurity. Our planet is 71% covered by the ocean. It regulates our climate and through the water cycle, oceanic circulation, and the oceanic biological pump. 90% of the excess heat caused by anthropogenic greenhouse gases has been absorbed by the ocean. The constancy of these contributions and capacities has its limits. Over 80% of the ocean area experienced at least one marine heat wave, and tipping points are becoming more apparent, with negative impacts on marine biodiversity and ecosystem services. Anthropogenic greenhouse gas emissions are the chief cause of the ocean's accelerating and harmful rates of deoxygenation, warming, and acidification. We need to reduce our carbon emissions, and we still need to draw down the excess carbon in the atmosphere and the ocean. One way of doing that is to protect and rewild a large portion of the planet. Fully protected areas deliver benefits ecologically, but also socially and economically. Many countries around the world have rallied behind a 30 by 30 call to protect 30% of the world's ocean by 2030, and this will be decided at the CBD meeting in China later this year. Ultimately, Southern Ocean Protection and the High Seas BBNJ framework can help us get there. In Canterbury, safeguarding the ocean's health calls for greater efforts to minimize negative effects on land-based human activities, in particular discharges and emissions. The IPCC special report on the ocean and the cryosphere specifically highlights fragmented governance systems as a key challenge to addressing climate change risks, and it is clear that adopting a mountain to sea or ki uta ki tai approach will help this fragmentation. Microplastics, industrial waste, and excess nutrients from agriculture, fertilizer and pesticide runoffs, and sewage carried to the sea and rivers and drainage systems degrade coastal ecosystems, further compromising the ocean climate services. We need much better monitoring systems downstream to inform our management approaches upstream. This ki uta ki tai approach to management is mentioned in the 10-year plan, but needs to reinforce the oceanic component and building capacity in our marine environment to then collaborate between upstream and downstream actors. So in the context of the 10-year plan hearing, I would like to make 3 key points. We request that ECan, through its 10-year plan, dedicates a lot more energy and funds to the development of a marine environment and biodiversity portfolio or an ocean plan. In our view, the current and overdue coastal plan needs to go much further and be one piece of a much larger puzzle, incorporating marine spatial planning, area-based management tools for protection of marine ecosystems and biodiversity. And despite falling under different institutions, ECan can still lead this process and work across scientific institutions, government actors, and nonprofits. Secondly, ECan has a lack of capacity for data collection in the marine environment, and that is actually one of our goals. Blue Cradle aims to deploy instruments from a research vessel permanently based here, acting as a sentinel ship capable of monitoring the coastal environment and the pelagic oceanic space, but temperature, acidity, and conducting bathymetric surveys and fish counts and biogeochemical analysis. With a dedicated vessel with state-of-the-art scientific equipment and the best scientists here, we believe Canterbury deserves to have its own capacity and understanding its waters. Finally, we ask that ECan acknowledges the fact that we've entered the UN Decade of Ocean Science for Sustainable Development and that it must engage in ocean literacy education, mainly through its activities and working alongside community and scientific actors. It is not too late, and UNESCO Commission in New Zealand is now welcoming submissions for projects to include for international significance. The last coastal plan was 2005 and was republished in 2020. Back then already, a lot had been identified to support the understanding and management of the coastal areas, but crucially, the work done previously does not seem to have looked at marine biodiversity, in particular seabirds, seals, penguins, and have a robust understanding of the biogeochemical climate-related changes. We can make decisions and implement nature-based solutions as they are a critical element in building the resilience of ecosystems, societies, and the economy. Following the 2030 Agenda, the 17 Sustainable Development Goals, and Sustainable Development Goal 14, Life Below Water. The only mention of the marine environment in the 10-year plan is on page 21, mentioning managing the coastal environment. It seems really like an anecdote, and it needs to be more acknowledged, as it seems not to even take account of the pelagic area beyond the coastline. Ultimately, the Blue Cradle Foundation is hopeful that by hearing us today, ECan will get the message to work on this and increase its focus on the issues. Finally, we encourage ECan councillors to turn to tangata whenua to find appropriate solutions to manage, protect, and restore the marine environment. Across Papatipu, Runanga, and Tikanga, there are a lot of management frameworks, including in the context of Kaitia Kitanga and Kiuta Kitai, that can be useful to implement monitoring and restoration plans. These include Maitaitais, Taiapures, and Rahui, use of the lunar calendar, and locally managed marine areas. Blue Cradle believes in working together to create an integrated approach in respect of the Iriti or Waitangi principles of partnership, participation, and protection. The 10-year plan is called It's in Our Hands. Blue Cradle's motto, is perhaps a coincidence, is the ocean is in our hands. So thank you for your attention. Tēnā koutou katoa.
Thank you very much, James. Have we got a question from a councillor? Councillor Craig Pauling.
Hi, tēnā koe, James. Tēnei tini kia koe moto kōrero kia mātou e tēnei ahi. Thanks for your submission. I had a question about, you mentioned 3 things for us. Sort of the ocean planning side of it, the capacity around sort of marine biodiversity, and then the UN funding potentially. if there was one thing you could choose, I know this is tough, but it's not worth it too, but if there's one thing you had to choose out of those three, what would be the most important to you?
I think. Thank you for your question, Councillor Pauling. For me, the first one is probably the most important. The investing the oceanic space beyond the coastal margin and actually having a plan which resembles a marine spatial plan, which could incorporate different analyses and also collecting the data that's already there, that's already done by NIWA, by LINS, by DOC, and just coming together with a strategy, and then the rest can come after. That's my recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Vicky Southwest.
Thank you for your presentation. That's really interesting. I was interested, you talked about the need to understand our land actions that then impact on our coastal and ocean environments. And I'm just wondering, it sounds like you've had quite a lot of a look at the data that we already have. It sounds like you've been working, albeit voluntary or unfunded. Are you able to give a sense of the sort of amount of money or the level of data, extra data collection that's needed to inform a coastal plan, in order that, and we're talking about notification by 2024, so sort of like understanding those timeframes and that cost, is that something that you've got a handle on, or would that need more work in itself?
Thank you for your question. For me, it's difficult to know what the budget allocated to the coastal plan is, and based on that, I would be unable to respond to that question because I don't know how much is being spent on that and how much would need to be comprehensively spent on the rest. So it's a difficult question, but I know that there's a lot that's been done already, funded by different CRIs and projects at a more national level. It needs a reshuffling. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Well, thank you very much, James. Oh, sorry, there's one more question. Councillor Ian McKenzie.
Thank you for your submission, James. Are you proposing Blue Cradle work with ECan in terms of developing these addendums to our coastal plan?
Thank you for your question. Sure, that's something that we can certainly help with, establishing a road plan and bringing in, crucially, the right people in the room, because that's probably the first thing to do.
Thank you very much, and thank you for spending your time coming here today. We really appreciate it. So have a good rest of the day. Thanks very much.